A man who had everything: wealth, success, power, found himself walking alone through a silent, snow-covered forest. His heart was empty, his life stripped of meaning. But in that stillness, he stumbled upon two little girls, barefoot and shivering, whispering words no child should ever have to say. "We were bad, so Mom left us." In that moment, his world shifted. What began as a simple act of compassion turned into an extraordinary journey, one of courage, redemption, and the unbreakable bond between those who refuse to give up on one another. This is not just a story about survival. It's about what happens when a broken man discovers that love can heal the deepest wounds. Stay with us until the very end, and if this story moves you, subscribe to the Retold Stories so you never miss the next chapter of hope and humanity. The forest had always been his place of silence, a ritual walk that numbed the noise inside his mind. On this winter evening, the air cut sharper than usual, slicing through layers of fabric as if determined to reach bone. Grayson Ellis, once the man who shaped skylines and carried his empire on broad shoulders, pressed forward with his head bent low. At 45, wealth had surrounded him like a fortress: luxury towers, magazine covers, business victories. Yet within him stretched only echoes of absence. His marriage gone, his sister buried, his success hollow. The world cheered, but every applause faded into the kind of silence that bruises. Snowflakes gathered on his lashes, melting too quickly to stay, much like the fleeting connections he had known. His boots crunched over untouched snow, each step marking a rhythm that tethered him to something human. He walked not for exercise, nor for beauty, but to keep despair from settling too deeply. The towering pines bent under frost, reflecting his posture, as though nature itself mirrored his weariness. He exhaled slowly, a cloud of breath rising and vanishing into the void. For a fell man who had once spoken before governors and bankers with unshakable poise, even the sound of his own voice had become foreign. He wondered if solitude might one day swallow him whole. Then, the silence cracked. At first he thought it was a shadow, a pile of discarded fabric against the white. But shadows do not shiver. He stopped, narrowing his gaze. There, beneath a bent pine, two small forms trembled violently. Their thin red shirts clung damp against their skin, feet bare, purple with cold, toes half buried in snow. No coats, no gloves, no shoes. His chest constricted, the kind of tightness that steals breath. He muttered words he had not spoken aloud in years, his voice breaking. "Oh my God." He stepped closer, careful not to frighten them. Two little girls huddled together, one sobbing without sound, the other still and vacant, her eyes locked in a hollow trance. When he knelt, the older girl blinked once, her cracked lips parting. In a voice so fragile it might dissolve with the wind, she whispered, "We were bad, so Mom left us." The words splintered something inside him. A man who could negotiate billion-dollar contracts without a tremor suddenly felt his body shake. He had faced ruthless competitors, held power in boardrooms where others crumbled, yet nothing had prepared him for this. He knelt deeper into the snow, fighting the sting in his throat. "No, sweetheart," he said, voice hoarse. "You are not bad, not even close." The younger child hiccuped through her tears, curling tighter into her sister's embrace. Without hesitation, he stripped off his coat, wrapping it around their frail shoulders. The snow clawed instantly through his thin clothes, yet he felt nothing of it. Their trembling bodies weighed almost nothing when he lifted them into his arms, far too light for children their age. The smaller girl pressed her face into his collarbone, as though hiding from the world. The older one, Hazel, he would later learn, remained, rigid, her eyes wide open, watching everything, still braced for harm. He carried them through the woods, each step deliberate, his boots sinking deep, leaving behind a trail that seemed to etch a vow into the snow. The forest no longer felt like refuge, but like witness, solemnly watching this strange procession. A man, once defined by wealth, now defined by what he held against his chest. When the lodge came into view, its cedar and stone outline glowing faintly in the twilight, he whispered to the girl in his arms, "You are not alone anymore." Crossing the threshold, warmth wrapped around them, firelight flickering from the hearth. He laid them on the thick rug, tucking his coat tighter around their shivering forms. The silence of the lodge was broken only by the crackling of logs and the faint ticking of the mantel clock. He fetched wool blankets, layering them one by one, as though each fold could undo a lifetime of neglect. Hazel clutched her sister like a shield, her mistrust sharp in every glance. Hope, the smaller one, whimpered softly, pressing her frostbitten feet against Hazel's legs for warmth. Grayson knelt nearby, utterly lost. A man who had dined with presidents and bought skylines suddenly could not figure out how to comfort two abandoned children. His voice slipped out in a whisper, almost to himself. "All right, soup, I can do." He moved to the kitchen, clumsy with pots and pans. The first batch burned, the second boiled over. He cursed, then caught himself, muttering an apology as if the children could hear. By the third attempt, he managed a simple chicken broth with noodles. He returned, bowls trembling slightly in his hands, and set them gently on the low table near the fire. He did not force, did not urge. He sat with them in silence, his presence a quiet offering. At last, Hazel spoke, her voice little more than breath. "I am Hazel." The name struck him like a fragile gift. He smiled faintly, nodding. "That is a beautiful name." "And your sister?" Hazel's arms tightened around the smaller girl. "Hope," she whispered, his throat constricted again. "Hope, a word and a name. I will help you," he said softly. "I promise." For a long while, they remained guarded, their eyes still searching for betrayal. Then, with trembling fingers, Hazel reached for the bowl. Slowly, carefully, she lifted the spoon. Hope followed, small lips parting for the warm broth. Grayson watched silently, relief washing through him. He fetched clothing from the guest room's soft shirts, socks, cotton pants. Turning his back, he gave them privacy. "I will not look," he said. "But you need to change out of those wet clothes." When at last they whispered, "Done," he turned, nearly breaking at the sight of them. His clothes draped oversized on their small bodies, sleeves swallowing their hands, but they looked safer, warmer. In that moment, something shifted within him, something painful yet alive, like the first breath after nearly drowning. He found himself reaching for an old leather notebook, the one once used for property inspections, and instead began documenting what had just unfolded. The hour, the symptoms, the fragile state of two girls left to freeze. He did not know why. Only that control was something he grasped by writing. As the fire burned low and the snowstorm thickened outside, Grayson sat across from them, watching their small forms curled beneath blankets. Their breaths, shallow but steady, filled the space that had for too long been empty. For years, he had lived surrounded by wealth, yet starved of meaning. Now, holding nothing but responsibility for two children who had been told they were unworthy, he felt something he had not known in decades: purpose. And he vowed silently that night, as snow fell heavy beyond the windows, that these girls would never be left behind again. Felt like a fragile sanctuary trembling under the weight of new responsibility. Grayson moved through the rooms with a carefulness that surprised even him, every sound measured, every gesture deliberate. He was not used to company, certainly not to the kind of company that stared with unblinking suspicion. Hazel sat with her sister pressed close, the older girl's gaze sharp as a blade, watching his every move. Hope remained quiet, curling into herself as though trying to disappear. He brought warm milk with honey, recalling a memory from childhood of his sister drinking it on bitter mornings. The girls did not touch it. He brought books, stumbling through awkward sentences, his voice uneven. Hazel only stared, her eyes full of calculation. Yet when he turned a page and made a silly attempt at voices, something remarkable happened. Hope's lips twitched, the faintest curve of amusement. A fragile sound escaped her, a giggle so quiet he almost thought he imagined it. For a man who had built towers and conquered markets, this tiny laugh undid him completely. Encouraged, he tried again the next night. His delivery was clumsy, his rhythm off, but both girls inched closer. Hazel leaned into him, just slightly, her suspicions softening for a fleeting second. Hope rested her head against his arm, eyes half closed as if trusting the warmth. For the first time in years, he felt not like a mogul, but like a man whose presence mattered. Still, shadows lingered. A piece of paper slipped from beneath Hope's waistband one evening as he tucked another blanket around her. The ink was damp, smudged, but legible. Tamara Blake, Medicaid ID 8805. Guardian of Minors, Hazel and Hope Lane. Grayson's jaw tightened as he read the forged lines. Anger surged, cold and precise. He sent the document to Cheryl Vaughn, a trusted ally who had once handled his most delicate corporate battles. Within hours, she confirmed his suspicion. Tamara was no legal guardian. The girl's biological mother was Naomi Lane, alive but in a coma for years after a tragic accident. This revelation unsettled him more than he expected. The woman who had abandoned these children to the snow was not their mother. She was a fraud, a thief feeding off forged papers and government checks. Grayson stared at Hazel, who still clutched her sister tightly, and thought of the weight she carried in silence. Children should not be asked to protect one another from the world. Yet Hazel had done just that, her mistrust carved deep from betrayal. The snow outside thickened, draping the world in white, muffling all sound. He checked the windows repeatedly, unease creeping into his chest. One morning, as he hauled wood inside, his eyes caught a detail that turned his blood cold. Footprints, adult-sized, leading from the tree line toward the lodge and then curving away. They were too fresh to ignore. He crouched, brushing away the snow to confirm someone had been here. Watching, waiting. His mind sharpened with the same ruthless clarity he once wielded in boardrooms, but this time it was not about profits or contracts. It was about survival. That night, he combed through the feed of security cameras. At 3:12 a.m., he froze. A hooded figure slipped across the clearing, moving fast, posture hunched, features obscured. But he knew. He did not need to see the face to understand it was Tamara Blake. She had been circling them like a wolf at the edge of the woods, testing the borders of his protection. Rage swelled, but beneath it, fear. For Hazel, for Hope, for what might come if she decided to strike. He did not sleep. Instead, he sat outside their room, fire poker resting beside him, blanket over his shoulders, listening to the even breaths of the children. His eyes burned from exhaustion, but he did not move. Not while danger crept so close, in the pale hours of morning. Hope patted out, holding a folded piece of paper covered in crayon drawings. She handed it to him without a word. He unfolded it carefully. 3 figures stood under a sun. 2 small girls with bows, and a taller one between them. Square-shouldered, holding their hands. The caption, written in uneven letters, was simple. Because you stayed. For a man who had trained himself not to cry, who had endured funerals and divorce with dry eyes, the drawing broke something open. Tears slipped down his face silently as he whispered, "Thank you." Hope only nodded, climbing into his lap as though she had known he would not push her away. But Hazel's voice carried a darker truth days later. She sat with a notebook, her small hands trembling as she spoke. "She used to lock the fridge," she whispered, eyes fixed downward. "Said we were leeches, always taking, always hungry. She told us we were punishment, for being born." Grayson's chest tightened like steel wires twisting around his ribs. He wanted to deny it, to erase it, but he could not. Instead, he placed his hand gently over hers. "That should never have happened to you," he said. Hazel's eyes, cautious yet desperate, searched his. "But you believe us, right?" His voice did not waver. Every word, moments of peace, wove between the tension. They ate simple meals, read fairy tales, planted laughter in small doses like fragile seeds. Yet the shadow remained. And then, one night, it arrived at his door. 3 slow knocks echoed through the lodge. Hazel stiffened. Hope buried her face. And from the other side came the voice, falsely calm, falsely sweet. "Grayson, it's tomorrow. We need to talk." He rose, heart pounding, fire poker in hand. The girls clung together behind him, terror etched in their eyes. He opened the door a crack. Tamara stood there, disheveled, coat too big, smile brittle. Her excuses spilled out, lies about panic and mistakes. But her eyes betrayed her, sharp, and manipulative. Grayson did not waver. "You left them in the snow," he said, his tone low, final. Her mask slipped, venom flashing as she snapped, "They are my family, not yours." Before he could answer, blue and red lights flashed through the fog. Sheriff Monroe and 2 deputies approached, their presence steady as mountains. "Tamara Blake," the sheriff called. She tried another smile, but Monroe cut her short. "Don't say a word unless it's to your lawyer." They cuffed her swiftly, uncovering her bag filled with forged IDs, burner phones, government checks bearing the girls' names. She hissed at Grayson, "You think you're the hero. You're not." His voice came calm, steady, almost tender. "I don't need to be the hero. I just need to be the man who didn't leave them." Inside the lodge, Hazel and Hope waited, their small frames tense with fear, until he knelt and told them gently, "She's gone. For good." Hope collapsed into his shoulder. Hazel studied him with eyes that searched for truth, and finally allowed herself to believe. For the first time since the storm began, the lodge felt not like a fortress, but like a home. The fire burned steady, the windows frosted white, and within its walls 3 souls found themselves bound by something greater than blood. Not a contract, not a transaction, but a promise, quiet, unshakable, that they would not be abandoned again. The storm had passed, but the echoes of fear lingered inside the lodge long after Tamara had been taken away in handcuffs. The fire glowed low in the hearth, casting soft light across the wooden beams. Grayson sat in his study, the leather notebook open before him, his pen frozen above the page. He had spent years filling these books with numbers, plans, and schedules, neat lines of a life measured in profits. Now his handwriting spilled unevenly, filled with details about 2 small children, their health, their words, their fears. Somewhere between the bast, firelight, and the ink, he realized the weight of this promise was unlike anything he had carried before. That night, the phone call came. Cheryl's voice was steady, but gentler than usual, stripped of its usual edge. "I am with her," she said. Naomi Lane, their mother, was alive, awake, and desperate to hear her daughter's voices. Grayson placed the phone on speaker, his heart thundering. When Naomi spoke, her voice cracked with disbelief. Are they safe?" Grayson looked at Hazel and Hope, asleep under quilts by the fire. His voice wavered as he answered, "They are here with me. They are warm. They are brave. They are safe." On the other end came a sob, quiet but piercing, a mother's grief spilling into relief. Grayson closed his eyes and let the sound break something loose inside him. For the first time in years, tears slid down his face, not from loss, but from something fragile and sacred grace. Days later, the air outside grew softer, the storm dissolving into pale skies. Grayson stood on the porch, waiting. His hands were clasped, his breath uneven as a silver SUV pulled up the snow-packed drive. The door opened slowly, and a woman stepped out. Naomi was smaller than he imagined, her frame thin, her face pale from years of recovery, but her eyes carried a fire that had endured. She looked around as if afraid this moment might vanish, afraid the vision of her daughters waiting inside might dissolve into snow. From the doorway, Hazel and Hope appeared. They froze, clutching each other's hands. Naomi fell to her knees in the snow, voice trembling. "It is me. It is Mama." That one word broke the silence. The girls ran forward, boots forgotten, tears streaming, collapsing into her arms. Their cries filled the air, raw and unrestrained, the kind of sound born only from being lost and found again. Naomi held them tightly, burying her face in their hair, whispering apologies and promises. Grayson turned away, standing at the far end of the porch, his arms folded not in distance, but in reverence. This reunion belonged to them alone. His chest tightened with a strange ache, half sorrow, half peace, as he realized he had been part of something far greater than himself. Life shifted after that. Naomi found a small house near the city's gardens, a modest place with enough sunlight for laughter to grow again. Grayson helped quietly, arranging for therapy, covering deposits, leaving grocery cards in the mail with no return address. Naomi never asked, but when their eyes met at drop-offs, gratitude glimmered in her smile. Every Saturday morning, the girls arrived at his lodge. They called it Grayson Day. Together they cooked pancakes, Hazel insisting on blueberries, Hope on chocolate chips. They planted rows of beans and sunflowers in the garden, their hands covered in dirt, their laughter rising like music through the yard. Hope drew superheroes out of vegetables, while Hazel sketched houses with warm lights glowing in every window. In these moments, Grayson found something he had not known he was missing. He was no longer the man hiding behind glass towers. He was a man kneeling in the dirt beside two children who trusted him enough to laugh again. Word of what had happened spread quietly through town. Whispers of the millionaire who had carried two barefoot girls from the snow, who had chosen to stay. At a ceremony months later, the sheriff presented him with a certificate. Grayson stood awkwardly in jeans, trying not to draw attention. But then, Hazel and Hope stepped forward. In their small hands, they held a frame they had made themselves. Inside was a drawing of a man with broad shoulders holding hands with two girls. Beneath it, in careful block letters, they had written, "You saved us." Grayson took it in both hands, his throat closing. He did not fight the tears this time. He let them fall as the girls smiled up at him. In that moment, the applause, the whispers, the honor, all of it disappeared. What remained was a truth simple and indelible. He had chosen not to walk away, and that choice had changed everything. That evening, as twilight streaked the sky in shades of coral and lavender, Naomi and the girls lingered on his porch. Hazel hugged him first, holding tight. Hope pressed her face into his sweater and whispered something only he could hear. As they turned to leave, Hazel paused halfway down the walk. She spun back, her voice clear. "You did not let the end happen." Grayson's eyes met hers. He gave a small nod, his voice steady. "Not for you. Never." He watched them walk away, their hands swinging together, and turned back to the soil in his garden. With quiet hands, he planted something new. The snow had melted, spring was pushing through the earth, and with it came the kind of beginning he never thought he would find. Some stories are not just tales to be told, they are echoes of what it means to be human, to face the coldest nights and still believe in warmth. Grayson's journey was not about his wealth, nor his reputation, but about one simple choice to stay, to hold on, when it would have been easier to walk away. Two little girls, left in the snow, had been told they were not worthy of love, that they were too much, too costly, too inconvenient to keep. But one man's refusal to abandon them rewrote that lie forever. This is what makes stories like these so powerful. They remind us that courage does not always look like standing in front of a crowd or winning a battle. Sometimes courage is found in the quiet, in holding a trembling child, in promising them that they are enough. It is the decision to light a fire in the darkness, even when the cold threatens to swallow everything whole. Hazel and Hope found more than shelter that night. They found proof that they mattered, that love is not measured in money or convenience, but in presence. And Grayson found something too. He discovered that even a man who had built towers high into the sky could find his true legacy in the smallest of gestures: pancakes on a Saturday morning, a laugh over a storybook, a child's drawing of stick figures beneath the sundae. These were not business achievements or magazine features. They were the marks of a soul learning to heal. And perhaps that is what we are all searching for, the assurance that even in our brokenness, we can be part of someone else's redemption, that we can choose to stand when others have walked away, that we can plant something new, even in soil once frozen. If this story touched you, let it be more than just a moment. Let it be a reminder that we too hold the power to stay, to listen, to love fiercely when it matters most. And as we continue to share these journeys, we invite you to walk with us. Subscribe to the Retold Stories and join a community that believes in the strength of compassion, the resilience of hope, and the unshakable truth that no ending has to be final if we choose to begin again. Because sometimes the most extraordinary stories are not about heroes in capes, but about ordinary people who refuse to let go. And when we hold on, together, we can change everything.